Thank you for joining us for part 2 of the SAR. In this video, we'll watch as Grant pilots a long grain train, including front-end power, mid-train pushers, and a rear-end pusher over his beautiful layout. And we're following Extra 709 West, running from Alberta to BC, a grain train. And it's going to have pushers on the way, and we'll be meeting trains as we go. So we're starting off in East Staging. How long is this train, Grant?
This one's about 40, I think it's 47 cars, so it's about 18 feet.
18 feet long, so 36 feet in HO. That's a big train. And you weather all your own locomotives?
Yeah, well, they're painted by me. I do everything myself. So each one of these cars, for the most part, I mean, some of them are fill-in cars, but I've got pictures of these cars in Calgary in 2007. It's the closest I can get. I try to do a lot of my rolling stock right off of photos.
And there's the train disappearing under the stairs. Get an idea of the length of the train here.
Now, I think last time you were here, I told you that these stairs were moved just to facilitate the construction of these staging yards.
Boy, that must have been some delicate negotiation.
Well, if you do, we can do whatever you want when they're at work. That's what I find.
Yeah, this is not advice.
No. And
everyone's situation is unique.
Yeah, and my wife is fantastic because she did laundry from a ladder. She had to use a ladder to get into the basement for a day and a half. So.
Wow, that's amazing. So roll-by shot of Extra 709. So Grant, you were saying that this road, this abandoned road in the front here, has a bit of a story.
Yeah, in the late 80s, the CP had to bypass the original line, and right now, right where the locomotive is this is where the original line would have taken off. This would have been new line now, but they built the Old Man River Dam, and as a result, the original steel structure was going to be submerged, so they had to build a new line across, and that's where we are now. So I'm modeling after the 80s, obviously, therefore this is the new line, and I wanted a vestige of the original to kind of place the location. Now this is just a little test section that I've done. It's not by any means finished, but that's what I'm trying to emulate here.
It looks beautiful. And that's static grass? Who's static grass?
I use only Silver stuff.
Yeah. I think I have a huge box of everyone's stuff that Silver seems to work the best.
Yeah, I like Silver the best. Nicest colors I find.
And you weathered all of these hoppers.
Yeah, for the most part they're all taken right from photos shot in Calgary or in Southern Alberta in 2005 to 2007.
Beautiful. You were saying that you actually use vodka to thin out the acrylic.
Yes, I find for whatever reason it tends to break the surface tension better than using a traditional a rubbing alcohol or an isopropyl alcohol.
Yeah, here we see the final unit. Now this unit is DPU'd in?
Yeah, DPU'd, yeah, exactly.
Do you run most of your pushers DPU'd or independent?
All my unit trains run with DPUs, and it's just MU'd to the lead units, so speed matching is obviously a concern.
Okay, Grant tells me this is not a micro-engineering bridge. It is a scratch-built bridge, and on close inspection, you can see it is. When this is a finished scene, it's going to be very dramatic.
This is just topping out of a 1% sag that we were dropping down. So the last shot when we came across that piece of roadbed that buggered off onto the original line, there's actually a 1% downgrade that crosses the Castle River, and then into this sag and 1% back up. So that's why we're just crawling up here.
Is this, Grant? Or how many cars?
47.
47.
The reason there's so much drag though is I put a spring on each axle, or on one car on one axle. I take a centering spring and cut it into, use 2/3 of it over top of the axle cap as a drag spring, and that takes away what us N-scalers like to call the slinky effect.
And it makes it harder for the train to make it up.
Yeah, it increases the dynamic forces for sure.
For those of you that weren't able to witness, the train slowed down markedly when it hit the 1% grade. Very realistic. So our train is pulled into Cowley, and we're going to cut in a 4-unit helper set. They're going to be cut in the middle?
Yes, we're going to put them just past the 50% mark.
And these are all Caddo locomotives, is that right?
Yeah, there's 3 original run SD40-2s and an SD45 in there.
But I believe almost all the locomotives, if not all the locomotives on your layout are Caddos, aren't they?
I try to stick with Cato, yeah, and I have a few Atlas, but I find that the wheels are real dirt picker-uppers, so I'll even modify those to use as many Cato parts as I can as possible.
It's a good question about what creates the dirt. Is it actually picking it up or is it actually creating it?
Well, I think it's picking it up for sure, but I also think there's a bit of a tarnishing effect too on the type of metal that's used. I've actually had a unit with original Atlas wheels that was left in one spot for a year that pretty much welded itself to the tracks.
Yeah. What's that switch control panel there?
It's a company in Edmonton called Signalogics, makes switch control panels for tortoises. And I just like the look of it. It's nice and clean and tidy. It doesn't protrude into the walk area here, so.
And it's nearly black.
Almost the same color, absolutely. So normally I would run with a separate helper crew during an op session, and because the grade is, well, from where we start to climb to the summit is it's 4 scale miles. But a lot of times the crews have to keep in longer depending on the traffic flows. So if a helper crew can push 2 trains in a 3-hour op session, they've done a lot of work. It can take a lot of time for a helper crew to get up and down the hill. Now, because it's a DPU, normally a helper operation in the center, they would pull ahead. But because it's a DPU on the tail end of this train, the head end would have to back up to the DPU, or back up to the helper units.
So that's what you're going to do?
Yeah. This is based on, I love going down to Montana and watching the Montana Rail Link. So this is kind of based on what they do down there.
So how much do you think that train weighs? 47 cars. How much weight is that these locomotives are pulling? Because you have what, 9 units?
7.
4 and 1, 7 units.
Yeah.
2 in the front, 1 in the back, and 4 in the middle. So how much do you think that weighs in real pounds?
Have no idea whatsoever.
Okay, we're exiting Cowley. What's the train we're passing behind?
This is a loaded run-through potash train, and a lot of the potash trains along this line run with UP or CP power. You can also see CAFX, blue AC 4400s. You can see Burgundy SD90 Max in 2005. In fact, that's the Burgundy SD90 Max were built for this service so that they didn't have to swap locomotives at the border. So this would be an export. The potash would be export to Portland, Oregon.
So why didn't they have to swap locomotives at the border? What difference does the make to whether you have to swap or not?
At one time, UP's Locotrol and CP's Locotrol didn't talk to each other nicely. So the 90s were built and joint leased between CP and UP so that they could use them expressly on this service, and then they didn't have to waste time rearranging locomotives or changing out power at the Canada-US border.
Boy, those Cato units were quiet.
Well, I just did the fleet rebuild too, all new bushing blocks on the worm gear. Or bearing blocks, sorry.
I'm never quite sure what the difference is between a bearing and a bushing.
Yeah.
I always thought the bearings had rolling elements and bushings didn't, but I was corrected. Good mechanical engineer like me, I should know the difference. I'm sure someone will point it out to me on the comments. There you go, there's a challenge for all you viewers. And you cast your own portals?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh, I see they're notched. Was that deliberate, or did
that's notched
the double stacks notch it for you?
That's a notch. That's a double stack notch there. Yeah.
But you did it deliberately?
Oh yeah.
It wasn't accidental.
Yeah. No, because you can shim those. What's the fun in shimming when you can just notch?
I love the paint scheme. Is it modeled on anybody, or?
No, that's straight up. If you look behind the cab, though, it looks almost like an E, and my last name's Eastman, so that's kind of something my dad and I designed way back.
So the scenery is very dramatic, but I don't spot a single tree. And will there be trees on this area, or is it prairie?
A few. It's really quite windy through this area, so the trees, if they're there, are really gnarled. So I'm going to have to do some really interesting foreground trees, and I'll kind of, hide any backdrop or scenery imperfections with trees closer to the back. But I'm thinking in this entire area there might be 100 trees laid out, and this is about 15 feet long through here.
You really get a sense for the size of this train. It's still coming. And there's our trusty helpers. Now, do you call them helpers, or do you call them pushers in CP parlance?
We call them pushers, so it's usually the crews identify themselves. Sometimes they'll split them in half, depending if you don't have bulk train. 2-unit helper will work on most manifests. So on heavy nights, sometimes you run 2 pusher crews, and they'll identify themselves as push 1, push 2, and they'll each use 2 units. And then, of course, when a bulk train comes along, then you just go down to push 1 and MU both sets together.
So Grant, these trees are not cute, they're beautiful, thank you for correcting me. They're all handmade.
Yes.
They're clearly a lot smaller than we see on the West Coast. Can you give me a little bit of background on the prototypes and also how you make them?
Well, the prototype is basically, there'd be a Douglas fir, and there's also some pine down there as well. Of course, because not a whole lot of rainfall and the high winds are very stunted. To make them, it's quite simple. It's just motor rewinding wire, so copper wire, basic bottle brush construction. I use sisal rope. I'll paint them, then I'll flock them with Woodland Scenics, and then I'll give them a little shot of spray glue and a little bit of coarse turf over top of that. Kind of the trick is how you cut the bottle brush at the top. So you make a loop at the top and you spin it, and then you just cut one end of the loop off to give you the point of the tip, and that's what I find kind of separates them from your typical bottle brush, which is quite stubby at the top.
Yeah, they look beautiful.
Thank you.
And there are thousands of them.
Yes.
Any estimation?
I know there's about 4,000 on the layout, and that's only about, maybe the layout has 15 or 20% scenery done to the point where there's trees laid out.
So what bridge are we looking at now? What's this river?
Well, this would be it's kind of an amalgamation. So this is Lundbrick on the timetable, and there's a bridge at Lundbrick, but it goes over falls. This bridge is based on kind of the one that you have on your layout, and you said it's Slocan River Bridge, is that right?
Slocan River Bridge.
But it's also got elements of a bridge outside of Brockett on the Crow's Nest Pass line. So it's sort of an amalgamation of three different areas, but I find that CP, because their construction and their architecture is somewhat unique, that if you get the right feel, it all kind of feels like the same kind of general area. I don't know if that makes sense. Sometimes you just got to go with what looks cool versus what looks accurate.
I'm a big believer in that. The fantastic over the realistic. Sometimes it just looks great and you just don't want to alter it. Those are beautiful pushers. I like the big numbers on the sides too. Is there any prototype that actually does it that way, or is that something unique to the SAR?
It's sort of similar to what BN did. They had the big numbers underneath the radiators on most of their locomotives. I think it was mostly because my dad was somewhat myopic when we came up with the paint scheme. Yeah, that paint scheme, if you look there, some have big numbers on them. Some of them have a large SAR on them. So there's, even in the SD40-2 fleet, you'd think that they're all the same, but there's probably 5 different paint schemes if you really start digging around at different...
I'm sure there's an article in there somewhere.
There might be. There might be.
But it's all part of the same family. So we got to meet with a UP train. Is that a CNW? Oh, it's a repatch.
Yeah.
It's not a heritage scheme.
I picked that number off a photo on the internet, not knowing that I actually shot that locomotive in, I think it was Nebraska, back in about 2004. So it was kind of a neat coincidence when I went through my photos and saw that I actually had seen it in real life.
So you've been a model railroader or a rail fan for a very long time.
Well, I don't want to get into how old I am.
I wasn't getting into how old, but
Okay.
how did you get into model railroading?
Same old story. Dad got me into it. I remember back in like the early 70s there, coming downstairs and HO all splayed out on the carpet. And, you know, that got nailed to a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and then it kind of went from there. And it didn't really take off, though, until I bought this house, and that would have been back in, what year is it now, 17, 20, 92? 92 or 93. So this is about the third or fourth, easily the third or fourth rendition of the layout. The first one that's been double decked, but this one, even since the initial benchwork's gone in, has been torn apart and redone, and you know, new track laid and what have you. But I've been going hard in N-scale in this house since '93. So.
And how long have you been working on this current rendition?
There's parts on here that are maybe 3 years old. This area that we shot down low here when we were coming up the hill across the bridge and all that, that's maybe 3 years old. When we get up further on, the oldest part of the layout that's actually scenic has been there for about 12 years, I would say. And it's going to come out. I'm going to redo it.
One of the benefits, but one of the drawbacks of a long train, sometimes it kind of feels like you're waiting in a grade crossing.
I don't think anybody watching this video has a problem with waiting.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. And they're probably fast forwarding if they don't like it. Yeah.
So that's it. We've made it to the top of the hill.
Okay, we've reached the summit. What area is this known as? Is it just called Summit?
This is Burmis. And on the prototype, Burmis is kind of a flat spot after you crawl out of the valley at Lunbrook there. So geographically this makes sense, but from a perspective as to what you're really looking at, it's not super accurate, but you got to take a little bit of artistic license now and again.
And it was 1.87 to get up here?
185 to get up, yeah. And then this is a flat area here, but then when we get another, I'd say 50 or 60 feet around the layout, we climb another section of 1%, which oftentimes would require the helpers to stay in. But because we don't have a high traffic volume today, this train will make it up there. It'll just be down on its knees. The reason they'd keep the helpers in is just to keep the traffic flowing quicker.
And we're going to cut out the pushers here.
Yeah.
Are those just stock microtrains couplers?
1015s. All my cars, I tend to mill the bolsters off and body mount everything. So everything's body mounted. Every truck on this layout is, or every freight car on this layout has BLMA trucks and wheels on them.
We're just cutting out those pushers. Those run into the passing track. You may be able to see it in the video, but there's a passing track behind the train.
So you can see the three, well, you can see two different paint schemes on here easily. I'm
going to do the honors here.
Thanks. You got big numbers on the car body, and then you got SARs on the car body.
You don't press the light, you press the arrow. There we go. Yeah, and I can see there's some fluting in the paint scheme on 301 as well.
And if you look 301, I like to really...
it's got a white face.
I like to capture a history of things, so if the sharp-eyed observer will notice that 301 has a short fuel tank at the back end, which means that it's an ex-Frisco unit, because Frisco ordered them with short fuel tanks for some reason, and they cut the back of the fuel tank off instead of the front of the fuel tank. And a couple of those ended up on MRL, and then MRL sold some of their SD45. So my train of thought is that that's where this thing came from. But I like to make sure that I can kind of poke at history every now and again. So that's an ex-Frisco unit. I got an ex-Milwaukee Road SD40-2 floating around here too with a short fuel tank and a side bell. And I also have a CP unit with a blower duct on the side, a laundry chute blower duct. So I really like messing around with the history on things and give it that family feel, but give it the details of a past life. Normally the crews would be calling out car counts to a joint, because my head-end crews, I won't let them watch this. I make them actually go off of signals from the pusher crew.
I recall.
Oh, are you one of those unfortunate guys?
Oh, I remember getting yelled at. Not sure exactly what it was about. I'm sure it was multiple infractions that at the point in time I didn't care about.
And I had you back? What the?
Yeah. All bark and no bite. Coupled up, you gotta kick it a bit.
I'm gonna give it a little bump there.
Okay.
I think we got her. Good stuff.
Off
Then
we go.
cut the air in and away you go. It's fun. I always find this super fun when it's railroaders, because they do all those steps, you know. And then the model railroad guys are like, it's like AFX.
Yeah.
That I don't find fun.
Some of them are.
Yeah.
Not all of them. This is a good view of the aisleway with the double decks on both sides. How high are the decks, and why did you put them at those levels?
Wow. I didn't know I was going to get technical questions here. Trying to think here. The bottom of the lower one I know is 37 inches off the floor, so probably it's probably about 41 inches to track height, 42 inches to track height. And the top, as we're actually climbing a hill here, so the top would be 64 inches, I think, is the highest the track height will get on the top level. And average is probably closer to 60 to 61 inches, I'm guessing.
That's interesting. And you find those heights are good?
Well, yeah, I'm like just a touch over 6'1", so it's good for me. And some of my shorter guys they have a little bit of an issue, but they do get to read Cato on the bottom of the fuel tanks of the locomotives as they watch them go by.
Well, I was going to say, I was going to wonder if they watch the Cato as they roll over.
So technically, this is still climbing. This is a 1% grade along this wall. And the actual summit is just about where the locomotives are now. And that's the 64. I'm pretty sure it's 64 inches off the floor. As I said, now we're down slower here because of the grade.
How many helix turns did you take to get up here?
It's not really a helix turn per se.
Well, there's a couple of loops, all right.
Yeah, there's a one kind of loop over itself of hidden track about 30 feet long to get itself up here. But for the most part, the majority of the hill is exposed.
Okay, so here's what an 18-foot long train looks like.
So you immediately transition off the top here when you come over the siding switch, the E-siding switch at Sentinel here. It transitions into about 1.25% downgrade. So if crews aren't paying attention, you come ripping up the 1% and you crest over the top onto 1.25 down, and then you got a switch against you. So you really got to pay attention here.
Great to see. And what's this siding here?
This is Sentinel. And as I said, you're coming down a 1.25% grade, and it's 40-mile-an-hour track. And at the west siding switch, which is just behind the camera, it bumps down to 20 miles an hour along the lake, and we affectionately call that area the snake pit, because the multiple reverse curves that the trains have to go through.
It sounds fun. Okay, we're now entering the snake pit along the lake. How did you make the water?
It's two-part epoxy. It used to be a company that made furniture epoxy. And I can't remember the name of the brand. The marketing name for it was 1886 or 1883 or something. And they make varnishes and all kinds of stuff, but they made a two-part epoxy, and you could buy it like a gallon of the stuff. And very inexpensive. It cures faster than the Envirotex does, that, you know, the tried and true method that everyone used to use. And it was quite nice to work with. It was a 1 hour to start setting and about 12-hour cure. So.
Grant, the rock work in this area is beautiful. How do you make your rocks?
Homemade molds. I go out into the field and find, you know, real rock, and I'll take some latex and some gauze and make my own molds out of that, and just lay it out. These ones would have been done with casting plaster, but hydrocal works just as good. That's what I'm using now.
Do you cast them in place or cast them at the bench?
Cast them in place. I like to cast them wet, and then I'll overlap and then chip off anything that doesn't fit, any kind of stuff that scooches out the end there that doesn't look like it's supposed to be. And then it's just a wash. I just wash them afterwards, and then I'll detail them every once in a while with a little bit of thinned out acrylic, and even some chalk if I find it necessary.
Extra 709 is nearing the end of its run. I'm just pulling over. Actually, I guess we're not. There's a train in the siding for us, waiting. There's a special B unit in the middle of it. You get to see more of that custom paint scheme. These locos are a little bit more green than the other ones. Is that more of the weathering?
No, it's a different color. So I used to use Tamiya paint for most things, and so the standard colors were Japanese Army Gray and Japanese Navy Gray. So those ones are Japanese Navy Gray, which has got a little bit more green in it, and Japanese Army Gray would be the originals that have a little. They're more gray.
It's cool. It's kind of a patina.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah. Well, Grant, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to thank you very much for hosting us today.
Well, thanks for coming by, Mark.
It's been an amazing experience. Lots of beautiful shots. I hope the video turns out as well as it looks on the little iPad. We'll see when we edit it. But thank you very much for sharing the SAR with us, and I look forward to coming back and operating. You got to make your way back west.
Yeah, I'll be
west
out
for
there.
us.
I'll get out there. I'll hop on the Canadian and take a ride. How's that sound?
That sounds wonderful. Thank you, Grant.
Okay, thanks, Mark.